back to my channel. I just want to go through a few more of your comments and then just a very quick update on some other things I've been watching. So one of your comments in a previous video was on the question of what is a normal life, and obviously that question is very philosophical and different people will have different views on that. You said that for yourself, a normal life is when you get to do what you love, and it is nothing to do with the fact that you are allergic to socialising or need support. Yeah, that's a perfectly valid definition of it. If that's what suits you, that's absolutely, that's great. Yeah, I mean, what is a normal life? Like I said, you can look at it in different ways. Like everyone's got a different idea of what is normal. I guess really, there are different. It depends on how you look at the question, doesn't it, and what angle you're coming at it from. I mean, what's normal for one person is not normal for another person. At the end of the day, it's what makes you happy. When I was talking about normal, I guess I was kind of just using it rather flippantly. Like I wasn't really sort of thinking too deeply about it. I was just using it probably a little bit sloppily. To refer, I guess, to conventional life. Maybe that's a better way of describing it, a conventional life as opposed to a normal life. Although that word again is also, all language is slippery, isn't it, and open to different interpretations. I was referring more to, I guess, being able to lead, being able to live being able to do things, I guess, that you might want to do if you were not hampered by your condition. So I do, things I love, like my interests and things that make my life bearable and tolerable. That is my normal. But there are also things that I wish I could do, like I wish I could go out to work, and I wish maybe I could have connections with other people, and those are things that you could say, if I was being flippant, you could call it a normal life, but obviously that's in big air quotes, and maybe that's the wrong word to use, so let me know what word I should use instead. But yeah, we could have a debate all day about that. That's a philosophical discussion. The next thing was on the topic of the ADOS, and the ADOS being the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule that's sometimes used in assessment, but not always. And you were saying how you feel that the issue for women is more getting to assessment rather than the assessment itself, where gatekeeper clinicians apply stereotypes to deny assessment. So the issue is not so much what goes on in the assessment for women, but getting to the assessment in the first place because, other clinicians, so general psychiatrists, GPs maybe, bar access to the assessment for some women maybe. And of course not just women, don't forget, men as well. And many clinicians are undertrained and might also end up overscoring as a result. So that's interesting. So you're basically suggesting that there are two issues going on. Some people can't get to assessment because of gatekeeper clinicians, not autism experts, but people who sort of decide who gets to go on and get an assessment, maybe because of stereotypes, maybe. But you are always able to ask for a second opinion. I want to say, if you come across one of these clinicians, you can always ask for a second opinion. You have a right to speak to another clinician who might not be so stereotyped, because not all clinicians do their job very well, so you do have that right to ask to speak to another one. And what am I trying to say? brain's gone. Yeah, and you also say there's the other issue where clinicians are maybe undertrained and end up overscoring as a result. So that's the other issue where maybe some people get diagnosed autistic who maybe it's usually people who are on a threshold, so like not clear-cut cases. Maybe some clinicians might potentially overdiagnose if they're not well trained. Of course, there's also the other problem where some clinicians underdiagnosed. There is that issue, I think, not just with autism but any condition. So you're always going to get some false positives and some false negatives. Just as much as autism is underdiagnosed in some cases, we have to accept that in some cases it's overdiagnosed possibly as well. Usually these cases are the ones that are at the borderlines, though, where it's not a clear-cut case, and I guess that's just inevitable, really. I think that's always going to be an inevitable situation, particularly as autism does not have a biomarker, does it? I think obviously if someone has been diagnosed, you have to accept they have been diagnosed. It would be offensive and rude, wouldn't it, to kind of even if you yourself are thinking. I do sometimes wonder about some people I've seen. I think, are they really autistic? But I wouldn't say that to their face because that'd just be rude. I would never say that to their face. And obviously, at the end of the day, if it's helping them and they're getting the support they need, then that's, then it's obviously working. And of course, these people will still have problems and will definitely still have some autistic traits. Otherwise it wouldn't go down to assessment in the first place. I don't think anyone will go to assessment who doesn't have any autistic traits at all. So even if I sometimes wonder, are they really clinically autistic? Even if maybe they are a sort of borderline sub-threshold case, they're going to have autistic traits, aren't they? So they're still going to, have enough of autistic features. I don't actually know where I'm going with this. All I'm saying is that we have to accept that autism is a condition where there are going to be sub-threshold cases where it's not clear-cut, and one clinician might say they are autistic and another clinician might say they're not. Do let me know what you think about sub-threshold cases, because obviously this is a quandary, this is a complex topic, and it's, I guess, maybe a little bit taboo because it could offend some people. I'm aware of that. I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to offend anyone. I just want just to air it because it is something that is there, it's a fact, this does happen. Do let me know what you think about sub-threshold cases, because that's a whole philosophical discussion in and of itself. Does it matter if they're diagnosed as clinically autistic when maybe they're sub-threshold? Does it matter? Let me know. That's a philosophical discussion as well. Okay. Now, so you say that you received an ADOS and you can only describe it as the most awkward social interaction of your life. And you say that this is part of why you do not understand the whole masking out of the ADOS thing. You don't think that that's possible to mask out of the ADOS. Although you weren't doing anything blatantly inappropriate during the ADOS, like you weren't monologuing and you were engaging with the interviewer, you still couldn't hide your social awkwardness. The ADOS, you said, seems perfectly equipped to bring out the social awkwardness, I guess even in subtle instances. So that's interesting. As I say, I personally haven't had the ADOS, so I can't really comment on it. Another one of you asked the question, how should female autism be represented in films? Now that's a really big topic, so I don't think I'm going to be able to go into that in this video because I'm going to have to think about that some more. And interestingly though, I will be coming on to this, there has been some female representation of autism in film recently, so I'll get on to that in a moment. Okay, the next one is, another one if you talks about the watering down of medical diagnosis to common personality traits and some clinicians going along with it. Now, you saw an author who acts like a know-it-all about autism despite admitting they had never been picked up for decades, nominated for a diversity award recently. So yes, there's this whole thing about people claiming to be autistic or who have masked their whole life, and you know, no one picked up their difficulties for decades, and this is quite a common theme, it seems, particularly among the neurodiversity movement. Again, that's a big topic, I won't go into it now, but again, it comes back down to sub-threshold cases and where you draw the line, which is a big philosophical topic. Another one of you says that if someone doesn't see the point of a diagnosis, then they don't have autism. I agree with you completely. I think that's where we draw the line, isn't it? When is it a clinically significant impairment? And that's what clinicians need to be looking at. When is it a clinically significant impairment? If it's not a clinically significant impairment, then I suppose you could loosely describe someone as having autistic traits, and there is such a thing as the broader autism phenotype. But I would argue that autism as a clinical entity, autism as an actual condition, should only be applied when someone has clinically significant impairment, because otherwise it just completely waters down the whole concept and it becomes absolutely meaningless. So in other words, you are only autistic if you have a clinically significant impairment. I do feel quite strongly about that. Again, I don't want to offend anyone, but this is just my view. I do feel quite strongly about that. If someone just has traits, no matter how many traits they have, if it's not causing them clinically significant impairment, if they're not affected by those traits, they're able to go and still, you know, if they're not clinically significantly impaired, basically, if it's not holding them back in a clinically significant way, then they're not autistic. The question then is, how do you describe those traits that they do have? Because they might be their traits might be autistic-like, even if they're not autistic. So how do you describe it? And that's another question. Do you describe them as having autistic traits? Maybe autistic personality, broader autism phenotype. How do you describe it? That's a question. So another one of you says that you needed a diagnosis as you could not function at work. So again, you're clinically significantly impaired. That will come down to the occupational functioning element. So at least in one area of your life, you're clinically significantly impaired. You can't function at work. Your husband pays the bills and drives. You move straight from your childhood home to him. So that looks like, in a way, like you found a sort of carer, in the sense your husband is your carer, but you can't really survive without him, if I'm getting it right. So although you manage to find a relationship, which does require a certain degree of social ability, you are still clinically significantly impaired and hence autistic, and you went and got that diagnosis. This is a thing, you see. You might be able to achieve in one area in life if you're autistic, but you're definitely going to find, in at least, even if you can achieve in one area, like say find a partner, get married, etc., you're going to struggle in at least, you're going to struggle somewhere in your life, and obviously for you that happens to be work. You can function at work, so you needed that diagnosis. You're clinically, that's an example of being clinically significantly impaired, and why, in that case you're over the threshold and you get diagnosed autistic. Another one of you talks about being overwhelmed by expectations. You have intense anxiety, you can't drive a car because of all the sensory impressions, you depend on routines. You're very tired of picking up all the sounds, the movements around you all the time. You're clumsy, and so you have to concentrate a lot when moving around, doing tasks. You need to rest a lot. You can't work. You're on benefits. You don't have any friends. And then at age 40, you were diagnosed with autism. By the way, I can just say that I can relate to everything you said there. That's exactly my life as well. Particularly a bit about having to concentrate on everything you do. It's absolutely exhausting. The sensory stuff, again, causes a lot of anxiety. I need a lot of rest as well. All of that I can relate to. You are married. You have 3 kids. But again, you obviously have great problems. Do let me know. I'll be interested to know, for ones of you who do have partners, husbands, wives, and are autistic, how you manage to find them. Because obviously autism is a social condition, and I'm just wondering how you manage to basically get a partner. I'm just genuinely interested, just because, obviously, I find that side, my autism makes that side of things. Obviously, autism is a spectrum, it affects everyone differently, and the way autism affects me is it does make that social bit really, really impaired, to the point where I've never been able to find a relationship or anything. And I'm just interested just to know, for the ones of you who have managed to do that, how you did it, basically. I'm just interested, because, I don't know, it might help me, whether I want to go down that route. But just, was it on a dating site? Share the tricks of the trade, please, because I'd like to know. Don't worry if you can't, by the way, it's just, if you can, but there we go. Another one of you said that you're on the waiting list for diagnosis, you're 59 in May. Good luck with that, by the way. You're reading a book on highly sensitive person or you've read a book, sorry, on highly sensitive persons by Elaine Aron. I'd actually like to read that myself. Sounds interesting. And some people questioned whether HSP, that's highly sensitive person, and autism are the same. You went on some HSP groups online, but you did not relate to them as much as the autism ones online. Yeah, I've heard of that before as well, where people question whether HSP and autism is the same. Personally, I don't think they are the same, and obviously you found it out for yourself. They are very different. HSP, obviously, you can be autistic and be a highly sensitive person. The two can overlap, but highly sensitive person refers to a personality trait, doesn't it? It's like a personality dimension. It's not the same thing as autism, but it just goes to show how some of the traits of autism can exist in the general population where someone isn't autistic and they might have HSP. I do wonder whether some of these sub-threshold cases might be more HSP than autism, but again, that comes back down to this whole philosophical question, which I'm not going to go into now. But yeah, let me know if you've got any thoughts on that, on HSP versus autism. Another one of you says that you don't get how people can have such certainty to self-diagnose. You would be very worried that you got it wrong. Exactly it. Like, I sometimes suspect I might have other conditions. I've often wondered about dyspraxia, I've even sometimes wondered about ADHD and things like that. I don't know. I don't know. I'm autistic. I've been diagnosed autistic. I might have some traits of those other conditions, but I haven't been diagnosed with those other conditions, only with autism. So I can't know for absolute certainty. It's just conjecture, it's just possibility, and I'd need to have an actual assessment to know if I also meet the criteria for those other conditions or not. And until I've done that, if I do decide to do that, I have no way of knowing. And that's fine, but I just don't know how people, like you say, I just don't know how people can have such absolute certainty. You can't self-diagnose. You have to go through the proper channels to know. It's fine to, to think, I might be, and it's fine also to read books on those other conditions if you find things that, like, say, might help you. But you can't self-diagnose until you've actually been assessed, basically, by an expert in those other conditions. So I'm 100% with you on that. Yes. And you also say that the neurodiversity that you wish your super able neurodiversity movement advocates were spending as much time fighting for greater funding, to support to support autism assessments and things like that, as I currently do on trying to suggest that autism and ADHD, etc., are just identities. I completely agree. You see, I wouldn't have so much problem with the neurodiversity movement if they were actually out there properly campaigning for people on benefits, to stop benefit cuts, to stop Tory austerity measures, to campaign for people who are most impacted by their disabilities. But instead it's all identity navel gazing. That seems to be what they're about. Semantics, celebrating conditions. Like, what is there to celebrate? You know what I mean? Like, if you have lots to celebrate about your condition, you're obviously going to be pretty able. If you are able to celebrate your condition, you really must be right at the top of a tree. Not really that impaired at all. For those who actually do experience it as more of an impairment, there's not much to celebrate. We're not. That is not what we're thinking about. We're not thinking about celebrating something that has essentially hampered our lives, are we? You know what I mean? So it's very much a privileged thing, and they do need to basically own up to their privilege, because they are privileged, and they do need to start, because they are so able, they need to put the money where their mouth is, and they actually need to start helping people who are less fortunate than them, and actually really campaigning and to stop benefit cuts, to campaign for, I don't know, maybe a universal basic income.